Before you buy the Osmo 360, there's some things you need to know. You've probably seen every review of this camera on YouTube by now, and unfortunately, a lot of them are either sponsored and biased towards the Osmo or missing crucial parts of the story. And as someone who's been making unbiased reviews of 360 cameras on YouTube for nearly 10 years now, and not once have I accepted sponsorship for one of those reviews, I can tell you exactly what the strengths of the Osmo 360 are, what the weaknesses are that you must know about, as well as how it compares to its closest competitor right now, the Insta360 X5. Now, I'm not going to focus this video on covering the entire spec sheet and going into too much technical detail, since you can find that stuff on DJI's website, but rather I want to focus on things that are more important, like user experience, image quality, and editing workflows. Now, as you watch through this video and see the pros and cons of the Osmo 360, I want you to ask yourself, is this important to me? Since some things will be a deal breaker for some people, but absolutely not for others. Now let's start with the design. As you can imagine, DJI are pretty experienced with designing consumer cameras, and overall I'd say the design is pretty good with the Osmo 360, with a few flaws that I'll get into. So it's got a fisheye lens on either side, as is the tradition with point and shoot 360 cameras. It's got this display screen here that is horizontal, and two buttons that will help you record your content. On the side, you'll find the on button, as well as a latch that opens up a USB-C port. And I'll say that I really don't like these camera doors, because for some reason you have to push this little latch to the right and then pull the door down, which is two different directions and totally not intuitive. I'm sure this keeps it extra secure, but it's annoying if you don't need that. So that's where the USB-C port lives, which is where you'll charge the camera. And then on the other side, it's got another one of these annoying doors, which is bigger. And inside this one, you'll find both the battery and the SD card slot. Then on the bottom of the camera, you'll find a 1/4 inch tripod thread, as well as some quick mount grooves. They've also placed microphones in various places around the camera. Not on every single side, but you will find them hidden in a few places, as well as a speaker here. If you're wondering how it compares to its closest rival, the Insta360 X5, here they are side by side. And the first thing that stands out to me is the vastly bigger screen of the X5, which is quite a lot bigger. There it is side by side if you were to put the Osmo sideways. And not only is the X5 bigger, but it's a better orientation for day-to-day use. Here's what I mean. Let's say you want to change your camera settings. Well, because of this vertical screen here, it's so easy to go through your various options, and you can tap anywhere around the area that you're trying to change, and it's highly responsive and easy. Whereas on the Osmo 360, look at the amount of screen real estate you have in comparison. So if you want to change modes, you've got to be super precise with your swiping, because it's very easy to tap around the settings, and especially in bright sunlight, it's going to be hard to do this. Whereas with the X5, the vertical orientation is just so much better for everything. I really can't stress how important this is, but when you're trying to do things like change the settings of the camera, just being able to have enough space. Here I'm trying to access the settings menu, and I had to swipe down 3 times to get it to show up, which is why the X5's vertical screen is going to save you so much headache. Even in filming this much of the video so far, I've brought up the wrong menu or struggled to get out of menus while I've been doing this so many times now. I've literally lost count. Like, I'm trying to get out and it's hard. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to call this out as a big flaw of the Osmo 360. One redeeming feature it has that the X5 doesn't have is inbuilt memory. The Osmo 360 has 105 gigabytes of inbuilt storage, so if you forget to put your SD card in, it doesn't matter. You can still record directly to the internal memory of the camera, whereas the X5 does not have any internal storage. And I I see this as an extremely useful feature. Another thing I like about Osmo 360's design in the battery area is that the SD card can be found right here next to the battery and doesn't require the battery being taken out to eject the SD card. Whereas with the X5, you have to take the battery out entirely to access the SD card slot here. However, I'd say this is a pretty minor problem since how often do you change SD cards? Especially if you have one with enough memory on it to begin with. I will always shoot with at least 512 gigabytes of memory, which means I'd be changing this SD card once every couple of months. So I don't really see it as a big flaw of the X5. Speaking of the battery, when we take the batteries out of the two cameras, Osmo 360's battery is a 1950 milliamp capacity, whereas X5's is 2400 milliamp. Or if you've got the new Ultra battery, which is a separate purchase, it will go up to 2800 milliamps. So if you're the type of person who doesn't like having lots of batteries, you want just the one and hope that that one battery lasts as long as possible, then the X5 has the bigger battery. Now, one major factor that has been overlooked by reviewers when comparing the DJI Osmo 360 versus the X5 is the fact that the X5 has user replaceable lenses. And this is a seriously game-changing feature, not just an afterthought point to mention at the end. So let's say you smash your lens, all you need to do is use the lens replacement kit and attach it like so. Voila, broken lens comes out, and then you put the new one in the exact same way. And right there, I've replaced the lens of the X5 in under 30 seconds. Whereas with the Osmo 360, it does not have user replaceable lenses. If you do smash your camera, you're going to need to send it back to DJI, but that's only if you purchase DJI Care Refresh at the start for them to send you a camera back with fixed lenses. Again, the replaceable lenses really is not a small point. This has totally changed the game for 360 cameras when the X5 was released and driven 360 cameras to new heights of popularity as a result. Overall, the X5 definitely has a better design than the Osmo 360 due to the better shape, the bigger screen, the replaceable lenses, the bigger battery. And it's not to say that the Osmo 360 has a bad design, because it doesn't. It's definitely a solid first attempt, but it just doesn't have the good things that the X5 has, which means that if you get it, you're missing out on those things. Now let's talk about image quality, and DJI are saying that the Osmo 360 has 1-inch 360 imaging, and that the camera has an all-new square HDR image sensor, and so on. So it's basically saying that it's cramming in a 1-inch sensor worth of space, which is normally a rectangle, but they're putting it into a square. When you look at the spec sheet, it says 1/1.1-inch CMOS sensor, which is a little bit smaller than a 1-inch. Now, admittedly, I'm not overly nerdy when it comes to this stuff. These claims go over my head, but I have put this to some of my friends who very much understand image sensors, and they seem to think this claim is legit, so I've got no reason to doubt it. All you need to know is that it's not exactly a 1-inch sensor, but it's pretty close to it. Okay, so that's as techy as I'm going to get. From now on, we're going to look at the actual footage of this camera, because the footage says so much more than any spec sheet will. So with that said, if you haven't pressed the full screen button on this video yet, you might want to, so you can properly see how good this image quality is from the Osmo 360. So I went out and about filming with the Osmo 360 around Sydney Harbour, and the shots I achieved with it were definitely impressive. The camera shoots 10-bit, which means it's capturing a lot more colors than other cameras that shoot 8-bit, resulting in more realistic colors. The maximum resolution and frame rate of the Osmo is 8K 50, which is an extremely impressive spec, especially for such a small camera. From an image quality standpoint, this is definitely a very impressive first attempt at a 360 camera from DJI. The camera will give you the option to shoot in D-Log M up to 8K, which is basically a flat video format that allows you more flexibility in post to color grade. And after a bit of color grading in the DJI Studio desktop app, these shots look awesome. Now, this will require another step of color grading, so if you're someone that likes to color grade, then this will be a great feature for you. If you're not, however, then you don't have to use it. It also has a standard color profile, which shoots colors that are still good to go straight out of the camera. Personally, I like keeping my workflow as short as possible, so this is definitely an attractive option. So that's all well and good, but how does the Osmo 360 360 compared to its greatest competitor right now, the Insta360 X5? Well, funny you asked, because I put them side by side here at Maroubra Beach in Sydney on a day with an extremely high tide. And from this wide angle shot, both cameras look pretty good. The dynamic range is solid, the clarity is good, contrast is nice, and both of these images are more than passable. When we punch into 300%, I'm noticing slightly better contrast with the X5, as well as the highlights being just a little bit more under control. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's sharper than the Osmo. Okay then, well, what about at a different location? Well, I found this old bridge that I decided to film, and looking at these two shots side by side, again, they're looking pretty similar. I think the contrast is a bit better with the X5 actually, but let's punch in. Yeah, the contrast is definitely better with the X5 again. I'm seeing more detail in this pylon here on the left than I am the right, and overall there's just a bit more detail in the water than there is with the Osmo, which is pretty interesting given that they're both filming at 8K and the Osmo does have a bigger sensor. However, this clearly isn't a massive advantage during the day. Alright, I wasn't expecting the X5 to be sharper, but there you go. What about dynamic range? Here they are again, and both cameras are performing really well for dynamic range. You wouldn't say either of them looks bad. Maybe the Osmo had a little bit better highlight recovery around the sun area. However, you wouldn't say it's bad with the X5. Overall, dynamic range is good with both, and maybe my face is a bit better lit up with the Osmo. In fact, yes, it definitely is. However, it's also worth mentioning that the X5 has HDR video mode. If you switch over to 5.7K, you can get this inbuilt HDR that brings those bright highlights of the sun under control, and this time the highlight recovery is just as good as the Osmo. Here's a look at 8K versus 8K, but with the Osmo I'm shooting with D-Log M, and I color graded both shots. I'd say the Osmo maybe looks a little bit better, although the contrast and clarity around my face is definitely better on the left. And to be honest, I was kind of expecting more from this D-Log M. I thought it would be a night and day difference from the X5, but it's not really, especially if you do take the time to color grade, which you would have to anyway when using D-Log M. So yeah, I don't know if this is quite a game-changing feature, but I'm sure there are other camera nerds out there that know how to use it better than I do. Now, Insta360 just added a new feature called adaptive tone, where it essentially adjusts the exposure in post to match the final reframed video a bit better. And at this particular spot, when I'm just about to go under the opera house, this is definitely noticeable. I'm much better lit here than I am here. However, if we play the clip through to where I'm in the middle, suddenly the Osmo looks better in this lower light environment with the bright light behind me. And the X5 kind of looks a bit faded, and I don't know. I don't love that shot at all, and I'm still not totally sold on adaptive tone in its current state, especially in scenes where the lighting changes. Alright, what about stitching? In between the two lenses there's a blind spot, and this is the stitching point, and sometimes this can lead to a blurry side of the shot for a camera that doesn't stitch well. So here in this shot, I deliberately pointed the side of both cameras towards the harbour bridge so we can see whether this is an issue. And right away, I'm seeing that stitch line's pretty noticeable with the X5. You can see that blurry spot there. And with the Osmo, I can see it here. Maybe it's not quite as noticeable, but it definitely is there. When I punch in a bit, it's definitely still noticeable with the X5, and with the DJI, yeah, you can see it right there that it's moving. However, one solution to this with Insta360 cameras is that you can actually change the stitching settings in Insta360 Studio. So I was able to test out 3 different stitching methods here with the X5, which all delivered slightly different results. None of them fix the issue completely, but sometimes they do depending on the scene you're shooting. Whereas there's currently no option to adjust the stitching with the Osmo. Alright, what about close-up stitching? Well, here I pointed the seam line of the camera directly at my face with both cameras, and obviously neither of them stitches well at extremely close range touching my nose, but when I bring it back a bit, I feel like the Insta360 is doing a better job here. It's like this side of my face with the Osmo is like squished a little bit too close. And while I do have a bit of a cone head here with the X5, it seems a bit worse with the Osmo. Also, when I brought it close a second time, I'm seeing a bit more of a double image here with the Osmo than the X5. But when it goes back to arm's length, there's no major issue with either of them. So what's the moral of the story? Don't point the side of the camera towards any important detail. Both cameras, in fact, any 360 camera is going to struggle in that area because that's where the images are stitched together, and the closer you get, the higher the margin for error. Both cameras shoot in slow motion. The X5 shoots at 4K 120, whereas Osmo 360 shoots at 4K 100. And if you look at my legs, I'm noticing a bit more jitter with the Osmo than I am the X5, so I'm going to give this one to the X5. Both cameras have a dedicated nighttime mode, which are both really, really good. This is a very dark area that I'm walking through, yet they're lighting up my face nicely and capturing the background and the overhead lights without any major exposure issues. Here's a static shot in their respective night modes, and both shots look good. They're totally passable at nighttime. I wouldn't say one looks miles better than the other. At slightly closer range, it seems like the X5 shot is just lit up a bit more, although the Osmo does have better contrast around my jacket and face, whereas it just seems a tiny bit mushy with the X5 around my face. But again, these are great results from both cameras. They both shoot in single lens mode as well. If you want to do that, I don't know why you would. The X5 shoots up to 4K 60, whereas the Osmo goes up to 5K 60. So I'll give this one to the Osmo. All right, this is a sound recording test. We're gonna put the two cameras side by side to see which one records the better inbuilt audio directly from the camera's internal microphones. Is it the DJI Osmo 360 with the better inbuilt sound quality? Or is it the Insta360 X5? Let me know what you think down below. I don't know about you, but to me, the Osmo definitely had the better sound. And from that positive note, unfortunately, next comes a not so positive note, and it has to do with lens fogging. So I had a post on Facebook get a lot of attention this week, like crazy amounts of comments and shares and interaction. And it was about my experience of the Osmo's foggy lens. It might have been blown a bit out of proportion, but let me tell you the full story so you can be the judge. So it all started when I was shooting the B-roll for this video, and I was up to the point that I wanted to test the waterproofing. Now the Osmo 360 is waterproof to 10 meters, and to prove it, I'm going to stick it into Sydney Harbour right now. Let's go. Now, just because it's waterproof doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to perform well in water, because stitching a 360 video is a different story to the camera just being waterproof. So you're going to need a waterproof housing in order for the stitching to work. But as I finished that sentence, I realized that the lens didn't look right. And I can see that it's caused some kind of fogging in the lenses. I don't know if this is because of heat or the fact that I just put it in the water, but this is an interesting discovery. I'm going to take a video of it so you can see. So this is what it looks like. That is definite fogging, and it's on both lenses as well. And this is going to ruin any video you shoot if it does this, because it will just mean that it's blurry in that part that the fog is. So I then tested it again the exact same way, dipping it in the water for a couple of seconds, and the same thing happened. This is a recording from the lens still defogging. As you can see, it affects the focus around my face because I can see this foggy little patch on the lens, and that's an issue. This is a serious issue. So I don't know if you could use this camera at all in the water, because if it does this, then even your underwater shots are going to be blurry. For context, it was about 20 degrees here in Sydney. The water probably would have been cold, but I don't think it would have been that cold. And I hadn't even filmed that much with the Osmo before that. It's not like it was really, really hot when I put it in the water. I think collectively I'd filmed maybe 20 minutes of footage over the previous 2 hours, turning the camera off in between shots. So there's no way it was at its maximum temperature. It was probably at an average to slightly above average temperature. However, I then discovered that another YouTuber posted about this exact issue around the same time that I did, where he was filming this motorbike video and his lens fogged up. and that fog there is pretty bad. When it's in your face and you're shooting a motorbike video, you don't have a face. And when I skipped the video forward to see his POV shot, again I can see condensation on his lens. So is this something that was exclusive to just being in the water? Clearly not. I then went back and reviewed some of my Osmo footage from before and noticed some things. Like here in this shot when I'm first setting up for this side by side, look how blurry my face is, and this is just in the middle. The Opera House sails are perfectly fine, but when I play this video, it looks noticeably blurrier than the X5. Then when I turn the camera so the lens is now facing up, the blur goes away. Also with these side by sides, do you see what I see? That looks like a teeny tiny bit of fog that only showed up when it was directly staring at the sun, but I'm pretty sure that's not normal. And after reading the hundreds and hundreds of comments on my Facebook post, here's what I think the issue is. Since the moisture was inside the lens and not outside of it, this problem is likely either a heat dissipation issue, a manufacturing issue. That was a common response I got on the post, where if you assemble a camera in an environment that is too humid, some of that humidity and moisture can get stuck inside the camera, and then when the camera is either hot and going into a cold environment or cold and going into a hot environment, that moisture will then move to the center of the lenses. And then the other main theory on the post is that this is normal and it happens with all action cameras, all lenses, and that it was user error. If it is, I'll take full responsibility. But to me, this just seems a bit weird, especially the fact that not a single person reported this other than me and this one other YouTuber. So is it a manufacturing issue? You would think not. DJI are a big company and they would obviously do their R&D properly. So I don't want to attribute this issue to any specific thing because I've got no clue. This very well could be a one-off. Maybe it was just me and these two other people and the camera's good. But I just wanted to let you know at this early stage that this may develop into something that more than just 3 people are experiencing. Quick update a few days later, and there's been even more reports of the fogging issue. Other reviewers are now calling this out, and I've also seen a few comments on Facebook from people saying they've been getting the fogging. So this is definitely not a one-off. This fogging is a real thing, and hopefully DJI notice and do something about this, maybe change the material used on the camera and around the lens to stop it from fogging, because if they don't, this could become a major issue. While the Osmo is technically waterproof, I can't see how anyone is going to be recording in temperatures of -20 degrees Celsius without these lenses fogging up, especially after a few minutes of recording, or film in the water where it's shown to consistently fog up both lenses from my and other people's tests. And right now there isn't even an underwater housing in the DJI accessories store, which would be the only way to potentially solve the fogging underwater issue. For context, I haven't experienced the fogging issue myself with the X5, nor heard any major reports of this happening for other people when shooting in the water, on a motorbike, or regular day-to-day shots, even when the camera is operating at maximum temperature. Anyway, with all of that said, does this camera overheat? Well, from all of the review videos posted so far, there's been a spectrum of results here. The average overheating time has been anywhere from 10 minutes to well over an hour. And when I tested this myself, I was able to record for 47 minutes and 41 seconds before the camera eventually stopped because it overheated. For context, it's the middle of winter here right now in Sydney, and the camera was on my balcony in direct sun. I did notice, however, that when it did overheat, guess what showed up on the lens? The dreaded fog. It wasn't as bad as last time because I obviously wasn't going from hot to cold and so on, but it showed up here just sitting outside on a nice day. Also, when doing this test, I noticed that the Osmo doesn't record one continuous file for the full 45 minutes, but instead it split it up into smaller files that were roughly 15 minutes and 50 seconds each. For some people that's a deal breaker, and for most it's not. Now again, I really want to stress that this is my experience with this camera, and other people are probably having a very different experience to me, and you should take my review with a grain of salt. Just pick the average answer between the various reviewers and the truth lies somewhere in between those. Now, really quickly, I know there's so much more I could talk about, but I do want to cover 360 photos. Overall, I found both cameras shoot a very similar quality of photo, even though the Osmo shoots a whopping 120 megapixels, while the X5 shoots 72. Actually, at this level of zoom, the Osmo does look noticeably sharper. When you look at the lines around the sails of the Opera House, that is much sharper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the same all the way around the image. In fact, looking at this naval ship, the X5 looks sharper here. This thing definitely looks sharper with the X5, and so does the water. And the bridge looks about the same with both. Although I'm seeing slightly more details in the buildings here with the X5 than I am the Osmo. So overall, I'd say it's a bit of a tie for both cameras when it comes to photography, at least outdoors. When we go indoors into a virtual tour scenario, so here we are in my office, firstly I got to deliver some bad news, and that news is that the Osmo does not currently shoot RAW, whereas the X5 does, and it's got multiple HDR and bracketing modes. And currently at 130 megapixels, the Osmo actually doesn't look as good again as the X5 72 megapixels, which uses inbuilt HDR. However, I discovered that if you drop the resolution to 30 megapixels with the Osmo, that suddenly it unlocks a HDR mode. And now look at these two side by side. They look more or less the same. I bet you didn't see that coming. Well, maybe not quite the same. I'm seeing better dynamic range with the X5 here and a bit more chromatic aberration with the Osmo. But this inbuilt HDR setting means that the Osmo can in fact be used for virtual tours, in spite of it not having a RAW mode. When I look across to my window here, they both look really good and capture good dynamic range. I'd say the X5 looks better. This building out here is a bit sharper, and all the textures just seem a bit smoother than they do with the Osmo. But the Osmo is definitely usable. You could totally use this for a low budget virtual tour. When I go in really close here on my two prints, the one on the right has more detail with the X5, but the one on the left actually looks better with the Osmo. You can see the writing is more defined there, and the contrast is also better. So again, I'm identifying a common theme here that both cameras look sharper in different areas of the image than the other, with no real consistency as to where that area actually is. The interesting thing though is that the 30 megapixels doesn't look that different to the 72, and this is because both cameras have a low res and a high res mode, and they look the same because of the way they capture pixels. So while the X5 is definitely the better choice for 360 photography, I'm going to go ahead and say it, you absolutely can use the Osmo 360 for virtual tours if you use 30 megapixels with inbuilt HDR. This shot is good enough as is, it doesn't need color correction, and it also doesn't need RAW. Even though a workflow is a personal preference, and I know a lot of you geek out over RAW. Now really quickly, I want to cover the editing experience with these two cameras, because when you're reframing a 360 video, this process can take a really long time if the ecosystem and workflow isn't well optimized for editing and reframing. DJI have an editing and reframing app called DJI Studio, which is a free download. And for a very first version of a software, it's pretty impressive and intuitive. You've got your footage on the left, the viewer in the middle, and reframing and settings on the right-hand side. And just like Insta360 Studio, you can interact with this viewer to reframe, as well as changing the field of view manually and doing your reframing using these finer controls. As this is the first version of the software, it's not going to have all the features of something like an Insta360 Studio. A few things are sorely missed, like the guides in Insta360 Studio that help you compose your shots symmetrically. I couldn't find an equivalent to this in DJI Studio, so you're left guessing where the center of frame is. Also, I found it really hard to straighten straight lines in DJI Studio. There are a few presets here that you can play with, but each of them still delivers some kind of warped field of view, including the de-warp setting. And no matter how I changed it manually, I wasn't able to adjust this. The software definitely has enough though to reframe your shots with a good level of control. And this includes color grading. So if you shot in D-Log M, it comes with an inbuilt LUT here that you can turn on and then adjust the intensity of if you want an automatic color grade, which sometimes suits the shot, shot, but also sometimes not. Or if you prefer, you can manually color correct yourself here. While you can adjust the speed of shots, there's no option to add the motion blur effect, which is essential for creating cinematic hyperlapses and one of the staple effects with Insta360 cameras that I've been using for years to create stunning shots. So if you are shooting with the intention of speeding your footage up, then it's just going to look like a fast forwarded video, which can still look cool, but it'll be a bit less cinematic. Overall, the desktop software is passable, but nowhere near the level of Insta360 Studio, which is a very mature software now and has options to do most things you'd need in editing. From what it's worth, I've heard reports from PC users that the current PC desktop software is full of bugs and not working properly, although no doubt they're working on a solution. And it's a similar story with the DJI Mimo app, which is a really good first attempt at a 360 video reframing app that follows a similar layout to the Insta360 app, where you can set keyframes very easily, swipe across and reframe the shot using your fingers to create cool looking quick edits on mobile. Just like the Insta360 app, there are a few ways to reframe, including tracking, setting manual keyframes, and a few more ways that were clearly copied from the Insta360 app, like the little joystick. However, this provides lots of different options for choosing the type of reframing experience that you like best. I will say I do like the design of this app, and in fact, it's even better than the Insta360 app in terms of the design of the bottom and side menus, where everything is a bit more visible. So that's a nice touch. However, what it's missing is effects that are specific to 360 cameras. While they do have a menu here of preset edits, these are actually video edits and not effects. Whereas here in the Insta360 app, you've got a whole library of great shot lab effects that were specifically designed for 360 cameras that you can follow and reframe your shots within a couple of seconds to create awesome looking effects. Whereas there's no real equivalent here in the DJI app aside from these preset edits, which probably won't be very good since they're not tailored to your specific footage. Overall, I give the DJI app a pass, but it doesn't have the maturity of the Insta360 app, which has been around for years and has lots and lots of great things you can do with your 360 footage. Finally, let's talk about the price. The Osmo 360 is $479 US, but not in the USA, since with whatever's going on there in the US, the price was suddenly jacked up from $479 to $549. I think we all know the reason for that, but the real concerning thing I see for US users is that they haven't yet announced a release date for this camera in the US. They've said it's coming soon, but I haven't heard any concrete details about when that will actually be. It may be next week, it may be next month, it may be never. It's a crazy world we're living in, but for now, people in the US, which unfortunately is the major market for action cameras, you guys can't buy it. But for every other country, your price will be the equivalent of $479 USD, which is an extremely good price, and there are no other cameras this good under $500. DJI had to be competitive on price with the Osmo 360, and they were. So if you really don't have any more than $500 to spend, then you should absolutely consider this camera. If you're willing to spend the equivalent of 70 USD more to get a more reliable camera like the X5, then your money will be well spent. I do think this camera comes with risks, but if you're willing to take those risks, then this absolutely is a fantastic camera that shoots awesome footage. But you'll just want to be mindful of the downsides that I talked about in this video. For what it's worth, the GoPro Max is rumored to be released sometime by the end of the year. There's been no confirmed date yet, but if you are considering the Osmo 360, but you're undecided whether to get that, the X5 or the GoPro, I'd say just wait until the GoPro comes out. It shouldn't be too much longer, so you can decide which is the best of the three. Now, with all of this said, I'll just say watch this space. I'm sure DJI will be watching this video and learning and updating the camera. You can easily update a camera, give it new features, fix bad features and problems with firmware updates. So no doubt this camera will get better over time. However, if you are keen to buy a 360 camera right now and you're considering the X5, before you do that, check out this video here where I review the X5 in depth like I did the Osmo 360 in this video to find the strengths, the weaknesses, and ultimately help you decide whether you should buy it or not.